Hello, today we're talking about getting your course approved when submitting to the database, particularly key reasons why a course might not be approved, things that maybe we generally explain away in simple terms, but we see all the time as reviewers. So the first thing to explain is what the function of the database is. What is it there for? And the main reason is to provide courses for potential usage on tour. That being said, there's certain things that we really look for. The first one being, we have 3 rankings within that system. We're not changing that. They're pretty broad brush. Not approved, those that wouldn't really ever be used on tour or are just lacking the polish that we need. Approved, which is a giant range within approved. There can be barely approved, which is a lot worse than very close to tour worthy. And finally, tour worthy, which we reserve for the very best courses because those highlight schedulers, these are ones you really need to look at. That's not to say that approved can't get on tour, but they're predominantly tour worthy courses that are used. Like I say, the vast majority of courses will be approved, and tour worthy doesn't mean that it's perfect. There are still going to be issues, and not approved will generally have serious issues, which we're going to go into later and show you some examples. Those courses, when they are selected at tour usage, that's the scheduler choosing based on what fits their tour best. That goes on a variety of things, and really it's up to them. If your course isn't approved, this video plus the forum thread should help identify the issues, but really the onus is on you to work out exactly what you need to do, and developing that critical eye when looking at your own course is key. Look at design tutorials. The Crazy Canuck 101 tutorials are brilliant for these. Twitch streams, and ask questions. Sadly, there are some courses that we reject instantly because we know before we play them that they just won't meet the database. Now, reasons for that: if it doesn't have 4 pin sets, it can't go on tour. We have 4 rounds, so it's a no. If we cannot find it in game because you haven't named it correctly, and please check the key details. If the name is not searchable in game, if the yardage is wrong, that one really, if there's multiple courses with similar name and none of them have the yardage you specify, I'm not going to spend my time working out which one you might have meant because you didn't check. Please double check before submitting. We get roughly 50 courses a day. If we can't find it, we won't review it. If you're resubmitting a previously submitted course, and for 2K21, if you are porting a course, please go to the My Designer page and just use the port course feature. We will just not approve anything. Even if you're making minor changes or what you might consider major changes, unless you're ripping up the whole course and starting again, don't resubmit, just port it. Unless you're specifically asked for by a scheduler because they want certain tweaks, if so, specify in the description and we'll just find a way to update the previous one. Finally, if it's too short or too long for tour usage, so sub 6,500 and really 8,000 plus yards, we can't use it. The common errors within not approved then, and this is why I think most people will be here for this video. We've always used the tagline of major sculpting and major surfacing issues. What are major sculpting issues? This is 90% of the courses that are not approved have this. It's a massive range. The most common ones are where there's unnatural mounds in fairway or on the green, things that are just throw you out of your round. The bunker sculpting, either it's too deep, it's too flat, whatever it might be. The slopes that are unrealistic or unplayable, and again I'm going to give you some examples of all of these and go through them in a video in a sec. Not flattening the edges of the fairways, we see a lot. If it's generally just really moundy either side of playable surfaces, I mean, with major sculpting it's really, is it playable? And the final one we see loads is unintentional blindness. If you're standing on the tee, can you see the golf hole? We then come to major surfacing issues. Now, surfaces are every texture you lay down, be it greens, fairways, bunkers, whatever. With that in mind, it's a huge range. The most common ones are surfaces overlapping, i.e. you just drop a bunker shape in the middle of the fairway, which creates a rough bit around it and it looks horrible. Cart paths coming through surfaces is another key one. Sizes, greens or fairways being way too large, way too small, or really inconsistent and leaping from one to another. It's got to be playable, and it's particularly with the new game, it's got to allow for more forgiveness than we would have done in 2019. Okay, one of the final major ones is planting, and if it just doesn't look like there's been enough effort taken, You might have taken some effort, but these are things to bear in mind. It's not really going to be something for rejects on its own, but usually when we see these sorts of issues, there's other ones with it, so you might as well take care of it at the same time. If you're leaving the autogen bushes and grasses in place and they're really close to the fairways or greens, that's going to be something that, if we're on the fence about it, is going to push us towards the no. If there's very little background planting, or if you've excessively multi-planted with trees, not rotated size changes at all, I'll show you some examples, because multi-planting can be good, but doing it on its own often isn't. And I'll give you some examples in a second. Trees in play or forcing shots. This can happen and be a good thing, but often when we see it, it's done really ham-handedly and just feels very forced. And again, I'll give you some examples. With these, it's really coming down to playability. Can I play the course without feeling like I've been forced into shots I don't want to hit? Finally, if it's an RCR or a LiDAR, we have higher expectation here, and I know that won't please everyone, but if we've got multiple different versions and people are wanting to play the specific course, the old course at St Andrews, for example, that version has got to be excellent, because people expect to play that and have it be real. If you're just chucking down textures and calling it a day without doing any of the planting, it's not going to cut it. If you're not going to do the background stuff and we just see emptiness behind it, it's not going to cut it. The standard for these really needs to be high, and they have a little bit of an extra barrier to leap through, in that realism for them matters more than a fictional course. On a fictional course, you can create your reality. On an RCR or a LiDAR, people have an expectation. We have to meet that. Now, the final one is holes that are just illogical or unplayable, and we see a worrying number of these. Don't force clubs off the tee or on the approach, and I'll talk through that generally and what that might mean. Consider and allow for layups. All of this is good hole design anyway, but we see courses where if you miss the fairway, then you are laying up the flop shot, because there's no fairway until 200 yards just before the green. If you're going to dogleg a hole over 75 degrees, you need to be really careful with how that plays. Often, a lot of these trees in play we've talked about need real consideration. With a lot of these, people are just trying to be quirky where it really doesn't need it. If you're playing a hole and thinking, I have to hit the perfect shot to get here, and any other play is blocked out, then you need to look at that. And finally, par 6s and 7s can be designed in game, but they're not very common in real life, and you'd need to execute them flawlessly. Generally, schedulers probably will shy away from that, so it's not a reason for not approved, but if it's going along with some other issues, then it's just a weird one that I would suggest people avoid. Finally, a little bit on the distinction with the approved versus tour-worthy label. Approved will have some issues. They're likely more minor versions of the ones that you've seen in not approved, so it will be minor sculpting, minor surfacing, etc, etc. There's a huge range within approved. Tour-worthy basically will have very, very few issues, and we're going to be more sparing with the tour-worthy moniker in 2K21 because we've got more courses that are coming in it every day. We won't re-review. If you don't like the fact that your course wasn't tour worthy, just ask why on a stream, look at it, but we won't be re-reviewing. We simply just don't have the time. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to leap into Course Designer. I'm going to show you some of those issues in game and what they look like. Okay, we're going to have a little look in design now at a couple of the major issues that we've just outlined. So the first, I've put up 4 holes. Obviously these are mock-ups, they're awful, but they're designed to give you a clear indication of what those issues are. Now the first one, you can see there's some really nice planting near the tee. This bit's good, but the further away you go from it, it's clear that there's been zero care taken, because I have taken zero care on it. So that's something that will, if on its own, that would be pretty close to a reason for not approved, because there's just no attention to detail anywhere in the background on this. The area near the tee is nice. You'll also notice we talked about unintentional blindness, i.e. not being able to see on the tee what you're hitting towards. You've got a fairway up here, but you can't see any of it because of the way it's sculpted and mounded. That would be pretty close to not approved because of that. Certainly if it carries on, it would be. Major sculpting issues, well, this mound here makes no sense and it's just in the way, and it's really awkward, and you look at the way the fairway comes off the back of it, particularly that transition. that's a major sculpting issue. Additionally, you'll see the way that the fairway kind of, when you lay it down, fairway surfaces auto-flatten the fairway bit but not the edge, and you'll see that it's diving down here and coming up here. That you need to take a soft fuzzy brush. I should say before I start this, really, this video is not going to tell you how to fix these things, it's merely going to point out the issues so that you know what you're looking for with your own courses and helping to develop that eye. Also, you've got planting that is too close to playable surfaces. You can clear that out in planting menus. And again, on the approach shot, you would have unintentional blindness because you can't see the bunkers. Now, if we leap back into this, I'm just going to clear the measure tools as well, just for ease. Now, bunkers are something we also see newer designers and courses that are not approved are frequently falling into one of these two categories. Either they are way too deep, and bathtubby, you see the sculpting's really gone badly wrong on this one, or they're just dead flat. On 2K21, the bunkers do sculpt themselves a little bit better. You can see it's going down into the middle quite nicely, but you want to have a high side and a low side. Raise this part up by about 2-3 feet and lower the bottom about 2 or 3 feet as well. You want the bunker kind of facing the player like this one's trying to do, but just don't go crazy in it. You'll also see this horrible grey texture and rough patch. You can't, if you're using a shape, you can't simply just drop a bunker in the fairway. Weirdly, you can with splines and it looks fine. In fact, let's just compare the difference. So if I spline a bunker, it doesn't matter where it goes, it's going to be awful anyway. But you'll notice you get this nice lip when you spline it and it looks nice and regular. This one doesn't. It's a quirk of the game. If you are going to do this, there are ways around it. Check out tutorials, but shape bunkers dropped in the middle of fairways just don't work. Coming to the green now, size-wise, this one's about okay, but you've got to think about the pinnable surface as well. In this one, you've got one potential pin spot up here, one down here, and that's it. We really want to have 4 areas where you can pin and have it play interestingly. This is a green that's borderline unplayable. The pin down here would be fine. The pin up here is dicey because everything falls away from it. Just consider severity of slopes in your greens as well. And again, we're looking at unnatural sculpting. Look at how it goes from the back of the bunker. Just all needs to be toned down a little bit. On the second, I wanted to demonstrate a few bits on planting. You can see the tree line on the left. The trees haven't been rotated. It's one species at the same height. On the right, didn't take long. It's just a couple of different types of trees at different heights, and it looks much, much better. Please don't do the one on the left. Do more the one on the right. But even then, you'd want to be planting more around the base, clearing out the water, bits of grass, etc. Another problem with this hole is the green is too small, and you also haven't given any sort of a run-up. If it's a 200 odd yard hole, give me some area to at least land it short. If the pin's there, I can't be expecting to land it here and have it stop there. With this one, because the green is so small, 20 by 10, almost all of your shots are going to end up around about here anyway, unless you're bouncing it into the rough and hoping. Generally, a good rule of thumb is go for around 30 by 20. But again, consider also the approach shot. How long have you allowed in, and is that a fair green size? And can you get 4 pins that are going to play differently? A pin there, a pin there, a pin there, a pin there. They're all going to play about the same because there's only one shot in. This one, the tee shot's not blind. Obviously the autogen planting again. And the fairways, actually we've got those edges smoothed out, so that's not so much of an issue. The issue with this is one of playability. If I'm hitting a driver off here, we can probably hit up to this end, and we can then probably hit a long approach into a green that's pretty well sized. The size of the green, 30 by 20 odd, is good. Problem is, this one's not even ever thought about, A, is there any variety in how this plays? It's just hit shot here, which is fine, but it's boring. But also, if you miss the fairway and you're in heavy rough there, you are now facing a 234 yard carry just to the green out of heavy rough, which you can't do, so you're going to have to flop back to there. It's really just poor design. If you're doing a long par 4, think about layup options, think about winding bits of fairway around here, whatever, and immediately it will look a much better hole. I would also suggest that width-wise we're considering going 30 to 35 at a minimum. In this game, given that we know tempo is so much trickier than the last. The next one we're going to look at is the fourth, and this is one that's trickier to explain, but this falls into the sorts of, right, this hole is just a bit too quirky. you've got a window of 235 to about 250 where you can hit a drive dead straight, and you've got to stop it in that gap or you can't hit the green. You can do these sorts of holes. Harbour Town is a famous case, but they've got to be done really, really well, and most beginners that I see doing them just can't nail the subtlety of this sort of design where you're having to draw or fade around a tree. Essentially, anytime you're going a dogleg of 75 degrees or over, this one's 95 odd, you've got to be thinking really carefully about whether it's playable, because in actual fact tee to green, this one's only 260, 270. It's the sort of hole that can work, but it's really tough to do. And really it's forcing a shot where there's no other good option. So, but planting wise, these are all multi-planted trees. They actually don't look, I mean, I've done far better planting, but they don't look abysmal in the way that some of this on 2 did. So that can be a way around it. I'm thinking I've covered most things. I haven't done the cart path one. Would be something like if you've got a cart path and it's just happening to go in the fairway, that's an obvious no, and we would be pretty much immediately rejecting because you're not putting any care into it. Major sculpting and major surfacing. Major sculpting just care about how the course plays. Can you see what you're trying to hit into? Those are two really big things. One of the other things we see all the time is green sizes and how playable your greens are. Do you have 4 areas for pins that are going to play relatively differently? Are the slopes crazy? Have you made sure that if people can't hit the green, have they got space to run it up, even if it's a risky layup? If I'm hitting out of the heavy rough, at least I've got an option to get it onto this one, or I can bail here or try and hit long. Don't try to make every green an island green. Consider width off the tee, because playability is key. We're looking for potential tour courses. It could be the prettiest course in the world, but if you're going with fairways and hole designs like this, I'm going to be not approving it all day long because it's just not playable. So what this was always designed to do was give you a bit of an idea as to what to look for in your own courses. There's going to be other things that crop up, but these are the major ones we see time and again. I hope this helps. Like I say, use the thread. Seek out tutorials. The Canuck 101 tutorials are outstanding for beginners or guys who just haven't quite got. If your course is not approved, odds are you probably need to take a look back at those. After that, Matt F27 does a Joy of Planting series, which is really good for looking at how he does hole designs. I do some more in-depth tutorials on hole strategy, as well as some longer ones on design philosophy and things like that. And those are kind of more once you've progressed from Andre and Matt's stuff. So I hope that helps. It's designed to be just kind of, these are what the issues are that we might see. Look at your own course with a critical eye, work out which of those applied to you, and have another go. Really, a lot of this might sound kind of quite negative and harsh, and I hope it doesn't. We were all in a stage once where our first courses were not very good. All of us have been through that. Don't expect that your first course will get on tour. It doesn't really happen very often. Don't necessarily expect that your first course will be particularly good. It took me about 3 courses to get to where I'm happy looking back at that course. So just keep working, be self-critical, and you'll get better.